mentioned that they wouldn't have existed.
Or it's possible that they would have all perished because the winter was very hard on them. They took a lot of loss.
Yes, yes, and I'm going to mention a little bit about the political standpoint of what could have happened with the landscape of the world.
Certainly, the speculations could be endless as to what would be different.
Here's my theory of what could have happened. Natives don't help them. Then English come to the country, getting upset that their own weren't there. They start a war with the natives. Right then and there, it's not a war for independence. It's a war with the natives. And what happens if the natives win the war? They develop a political standing in the world. So
you're saying somehow the war, a secondary expedition, and they try to retake the British colony, and it serves to galvanize the tribes of Indians, and they somehow unite on the American continent and make a full nation instead of scattering the way that they did previous.
So it would be the United Iroquois Front.
It certainly would make an interesting parallel universe, and I think to a point a righteous front. It would be very, very interesting to see what would happen in that state. But let me ask you this. On the global front, what if it had nothing to do with England coming back? What if another empire, say the French or the Spanish Empire, came into ascendancy?
See, here's my theory. Let's just say England gets wiped out. Instead of having the French and Indian war, you would have the French versus the Indians. And what could have taken place was that Napoleon could have wound up taking over America.
Well, that's interesting. So you're saying, what if Napoleon beat Russia and in his own lifetime somehow launched a naval engagement against the United States? I mean, what year was the Napoleonic conflict?
See, Napoleon was 1800.
Well, what we're talking about predates that considerably.
Yes, yes, but the thing is, here's what happened in history. And I'm going to take the history, and I'm going to take this parallel history.
Right on, right on.
1600s, they get wiped out. 1650, there's a war with England, and the natives. Then, around the time of the French and Indian War, since England are wiped out, they don't want any part of the natives because they've been beat. The natives run in conflict with the French around the time of the French and Indian War. They run into conflict. And what happens because of that is
yeah, so I guess the point behind what you're saying is that the great global behemoth that was the British Empire, when the American colonies declared independence, the British Empire was still a planetary, it was a global empire. I mean, they had Africa, they had India, they had all this stuff until very, very late. But if they failed and they never capitalized on America, and the continental United States fell primarily into the French hands, beyond what happened in Canada with French Canada, beyond what happened in New Orleans, because there was great French influence in certain parts of the country. Um, but around our founding, when the United States came into being, it was fueled by the French Revolution and by the writings of various Europeans in the French court. They're the ones that inspired it. In your original model of this alternate history, you were talking about how somehow the Native Americans were galvanized into a single nation.
And however, let's just say there's two theories that could happen. Natives win the war, or the French win the war. If the French win the war, we have French and natives in the land, and some of the people coming over, but English, no, shall I say, French would have been the national language of America.
Possibly.
And then it would transform into something else afterwards. Just food for thought.
Yes, yes. But how do you think the French would have handled a Native American front, a nation of resistance? Do you think the French Empire would persist against something like that?
Well, if we're thinking of a native front, it would be it would be two major powers on the North American coast, and we're not even taking into account us Spain.
Well, yeah, we would have to pick an empire. I mean, they all had various interests in various parts of America. Like, if it's not continental North America, it's Central and Latin America, South America. They all had interests at one point in trying to take pieces of that.
And all I gotta ask you a question. What happens in the United States of America under French and the natives that in the Civil War time period?
Would there be a civil war?
What would the Civil War be about?
It's very unpopular history, but our Civil War in our current timeline that we live in was a globalist war. The South was buying slaves from off of British ships. I mean, that's a matter of historic record. That's not a conspiracy. So, because the French made slavery illegal. So the question remains: would you have a civil war at all?
And would people from Africa even come over to America?
Well, the point is that if the founding of the country were more firmly placed in the French Revolution's ideology, would you have had slaves at all, or would they have abolished slavery when they signed the Constitution originally? Yeah. Them all being French-speaking instead of English-speaking colonists. What if their Constitution renounced slavery the way that the French Constitution did during the French Revolution? Yeah. They didn't have, supposedly they didn't have slaves. The British Empire, it took them a lot longer to do that. And even then, it was conditional. So these are many, many different parallel realities, many, many different things to consider. It's very interesting to talk about.
I think you brought up a lot of scenarios in this parallel Earth, shall we say, of what happens if the natives not the natives, what happens if the English from Plymouth didn't exist, or God XL, or something like that.
Yeah, it all starts off with the original suggestion. What if they were not? What if they didn't get the help they needed, or what if the resistance was greater
Yeah,
and they didn't survive that first winter, that crucial winter,
yeah,
which was already so hostile to their claim to begin with?
yeah,
What if it was more so, and the original colonies never took? So this parallel universe makes it where the French take over, and what does that? What does that do? You know, that's all very, very interesting to consider.
all I gotta say is, who would be on dollar bill?
Well, who backed? I mean, I think George Washington was in the English army before he was in any American army. That's where he got his experience. So the question would be, who lived during that time in France? Who would have been sent over as a French officer?
You gotta think of French, and you gotta think of another scenario. What happens if Louis the 14th or whatever his name didn't get killed?
Hmm.
Or
What if the French
his
Revolution
head
never happened, you mean?
yes, but that's a topic for another day.
Very likely, yes. So this has been another episode of Spiritus Holographica on the Joseph Vivaldi Network. I'm Ricky Bearhart,
I'm Wolfman Joe.
and today we gave you a little perspective on the Spiritus Holographica, which is the hologram of spirituality, and what does that mean for history, parallel history, and the endless potentials of what if. Spiritus Holographica is a program on the Joseph Vivaldi Network, but Ricky Bearhart, that's me, I'm a guest from the Okeanos Network. The Okeanos Network features 6 different channels. I mentioned some of them earlier, but the ones that I neglected to mention was the Court of Pharaonic Eyes, which is a spirituality channel. We talk about various spiritual practices and myth and legends and rite and what people believe in. Then there is Metrics of the Golden Hologram, which talks about religion, and it mostly focuses around orthodoxy and counter-orthodoxy of religious belief and how that shapes culture and thought. And the last channel is Temporality's Shadow, which is a paranormal research channel where the host is a spirit radio wormhole named Arcananon 1. The co-host, Twilight Cricket, reads various scriptures, stories, and poems into the spirit radio, and then does sweeps to check what voices or sounds rise up out of that device. There's also other interviews where we interview people who will read into the device and ask it questions and interface with it in other ways. These are some of the programs on the Okeanos Network. The Okeanos Network, A Creative Baptism for Every Day, featuring the writings and talents of Richard Andrew Olcus.
Very, very good, Ricky. Those are very good shows to look out for on the Okeanos Network.
Thanks a lot, Wolfman.
And actually, shows that I'm going to plug for the Joseph Vivaldi Network are some shows that Ricky, Twilight Cricket, or even Curtis Bearhart are on. Some shows are in the fall, some shows are even in the winter. I'm going to mention that. One we're happy to have the Ricky and Wolfman show